You're good.
Welcome to Cornerstone. And tonight's speaker is he's a good friend of mine. He's got me into this business many years ago. He's a wealth of knowledge, and he's going to talk about age and life expectancies. And I'll turn it over to you, Stan.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to talk about the age and life expectancies of basically the major components of a home. It's probably been a topic of discussion for the 4 decades that I've been involved in home inspections. Okay, Jim. So we're going to talk about, at least with the age, the turning age. Is it required or not required? Is it important or not important? And life expectancies, there's manufacturers' estimates, there's home inspectors' estimates, and there's industry estimates. And then we'll talk a little bit about final tips and takeaways from what we've discussed. Okay, Jim. So for the purpose of this webinar, we'll kind of stay on the bigger components of the home. So the roof, heating system, the water heater, air conditioning, heat pumps. They're the major components that all get replaced on a fairly regular basis. Next, Jim. So gathering the facts, it's not always possible to determine the age of the component during a home inspection. So then what do you do? I see some inspectors go through great lengths, calling the manufacturer with the data plate information, trying to determine the age of units. At least with mechanical systems, they may have some data on there, date code and the serial number or whatever. Roofs, I don't think I've seen one roofer write the date of installation on a shingle. So those are going to be a little different. But is it all really necessary? And is there a line where, or a time where you draw the line? So we'll talk about that. When I first got into the home inspection business, I brought along with me experience in the trades dealing with HVAC and electrical because I was in that field for a while. So I knew what the industry felt the real useful life of mechanical systems were. Not so much because I was in it for that long of a time, but the people I work with spent a lot of time in the business, and they knew exactly how long these things lasted to a certain extent because they worked with them for years and years and years. What surprised me was that the home inspector profession was not required to determine the age or useful life of the major components. Okay, Jim. So at that point in time, I joined ASHI because they had a standard of practice that I believed elevated their members over other inspectors in my then unlicensed state. So I became a member. If you look at the ASHI standards, now this is not from the one from 37 years ago. I could never find a copy of that. I throw my stuff away as soon as 7 years are up, that stuff's going. But it's written similar to this. If you look down at the bottom of the page there, it says those systems and components inspected that in the professional judgment of the inspector are not functioning properly, significantly deficient, unsafe, or are near the end of their service lives. And that's, that turns out to be a visual a lot of times if you can't determine exactly when something was installed or manufactured. So in Connecticut, if you look at the highlighted parts, the remaining, we're not required to determine the remaining life of any system or component. However, we are supposed to determine if they are near the end of their service life. So that's kind of almost the same thing, because if you know what the service life is, and if you determine the age, then you can kind of tell somebody how long they may have left on that component. At least I try to. I think it's important, and we may have this in another slide. I think it's important to try and give somebody an idea of what they're going to spend in the next couple of years on these older items if we know how long they may last.
Stan,
Okay.
if you have a water heater and you put the water heater's in good condition, I didn't see any leaking, and you don't put the life cycle, but you put the age because you've got, a lot of water heaters have the date of manufacturer right on it. and you put that in your styles and materials, does that apply to the state standard? Like, is that telling them? Probably not. No.
So we're going to get into some charts here. We're not going to get into them in detail, but if you go and Google useful life of home household components or whatever, you could get 5 or 6 different charts with 5 or 6 different ranges of useful life. So it's very difficult to zone in. I put in my reports what I have now learned over 37 years of how long these things last. And I try to be as fair as possible. If I can't date the age, then I look at the condition, and we're going to get in all this. But I do put, when I know the age or find out the age, I do put that in my report, and I do say what the useful life is. And that's right there. If you can't figure out what the remaining useful life is from that information, maybe you shouldn't have had a home inspection. But in Jersey, nothing in this section shall be construed to require a licensee to determine the life expectancy of any system or component. Jim? Mass shall not be required to report on the remaining life expectancy of any component or system. Rhode Island shall not be required to provide information on the remaining. So it's almost like they sent the memo around to all the states that are licensed and get that language. And then in Florida, shall give a reason why the system or component was reported as significantly deficient or near the end of its service life. So they went a step farther, especially with the service life. All right, none of the above. None of these standards require the inspector to determine the age of a component or system. But I think it's kind of hard unless that component is in really bad shape to determine if it's at the end of its useful life. So the age helps a little bit. Go ahead, Jim. So how does one determine a component is at the end of its useful life if you do not know the age? So we're going to get into that. Determining a remaining useful life, we know we cannot predict the future. In my opinion, determining the age of a component is important to give the ability for buyers to budget the next 5 years based on age and useful life of major components. So that's my crystal ball right there. If you're looking at this as a pre-recorded webinar, record this view code LE506016 and submit it with the second code at the end of your viewing for your certificate. There's different terms that different home inspectors use. So you pick your poison at the end of its useful life, design life, service life, expected life, all the same. All right, Jim. Is significantly deficient the same as near the end of service life? So I have seen components that were significantly deficient, but nowhere near the end of their useful life based on their age. So they were just either poorly serviced, neglected, in a bad environment. Under better conditions with proper maintenance, they probably would have lasted longer. And sometimes if that determines the end of their useful life because they're so bad that they even service and repairs wouldn't be a permanent fix on them. In lighting parlance, the average rated life, ARL, of a lamp or a bulb refers to the time it takes for exactly half of the bulbs, 50%, of a test sample to die out while the other half continue to burn. The average rated life of a light bulb is also popularly known as half-life. We express this in hours and is indicator of the longevity of lights. So they wait for half of those bulbs to go out. Some are going to go out early. Some are going to stay on longer than that 50%, but that's the average useful life. And I think that most of us, when we talk about life expectancy of any component, are giving a range. So let's just use a water heater, for example, a gas-fired water heater, 10 to 15 years. I've seen them last longer, but if I've seen, I don't even know how many, 10,000 water heaters. Well, they're not all the same, but you get my drift. And they're all, maybe a percentage of them went further, and who knows how many failed earlier. But I see them out there in that 10 to 15 range. That's what I'm using. And I do that with all the components that I've seen over the years. So here are some of these charts that I've pulled off the internet that, and there's a lot more. So that's the ASHRAE equipment life expectancy chart. I can't see that, it's kind of small, but some of those, they're all over the place if you compare them to other charts. And I think we all know that some of these are off just based on our personal experience of what we see on a regular basis. So we all have to develop how we want to report on all this. I can't say for certain everybody's putting in what they think the expected life of a system is, or the age of the system if they determine that, or how they report on any of this. But I think if it's been working for you, then you continue the way you've been going. I don't think there's one set way to do it or one right way to do it. Okay, Jim. Here's a couple more charts. So air conditioning, 7 to 15 years. I'm going to use a couple as an example. So I think I've seen and actually owned air conditioning systems that if you use them, if you turn them on from say May and use them till October, I think you're looking at a 15 to 20 year useful life with proper care and maintenance. If you only use them, say in our region for July to August, you're probably going to get 25 years out of them, maybe longer. We've all seen the 30-year-old units out there that still operate. They probably take longer to cool a house. They probably don't run as efficiently, but they're still operating. We can't base our useful life off of those. So that to me is a little short. A boiler, you're going to blanket a boiler at 40 years. You know, steel doesn't get anywhere near that. Let's see if there's any other good ones here. I mean, ducting 60 to 100, I guess. You can furnace 15 to 25. I would agree with that. But then we can go to another one and they're going to be a little different. So I only get involved with those on the bigger ticket items in the home. Okay, Jim. If you Google the useful life of a warm air furnace, it'll tell you that it depends on several factors. Generally, a well-maintained furnace can last 15 to 20 years. With excellent routine maintenance and a bit of luck, it might even endure longer. However, a neglected furnace may not survive beyond its warranty period. Oil-fueled furnaces tend to have the longest life expectancy, while gas furnaces have a shorter life. I have never seen any proof of that, to be honest with you. Maybe you guys have. I just don't think that's true. I haven't seen it. Electric furnaces, I don't even know how many I've seen of those, if I ever seen one. All right. I would say that because there is no direct flame, they probably do last longer. But if they have, and even if they had a heat exchanger, they're not, if they crack, who cares? There's no carbon monoxide. So based on my experience, I have seen that the majority of forced air systems, gas, oil predominantly, lasting 25 plus years. That's what I see. Is it fair to say that 15 to 20 years when a system may have 10 more years left? That's up to you. That protects you. If somebody comes after you because of useful life, is it best not to breach the subject at all? That's up to you as well. If you disclaim it, then you don't do it. Where we don't have to. Do you need to know design life and age to determine if a system is nearing the end of its useful life? If useful life is 25 years old and the age is 12 years old, it's obviously not at the end of its useful life if properly cared for and maintained. Useful life 25 years, age is 26 years old. By those numbers, it has exceeded its useful life, and that's what I would say, me personally. Can you tell by looking at the component? Next slide, Jim. So if you didn't know the age of these units, can you tell by just their style, the cabinet style, that they're older? I personally can, especially the ones with the rounded cabinets. But some of these are in pretty bad shape too, as well. And you could take that in consideration. So for me, if I couldn't determine the age of these guys, if it's not written on a unit or I didn't see a date code and a serial number, I would call every one of these beyond their useful life. They may still run, but I'm putting people on notice. This was a ancient thermopride that looked pretty good, still kicking. Thermopride's unique in that they're way beyond 25, but I don't even know what the top end of their useful life is. And I tell people that I would never be afraid to tell somebody you didn't know something, or who knows how long this is going to last.
Stan, just one thing too, with these thermoprides, you can't get the dates off it. You got to actually call them.
You got to call them. I don't do that. I know a lot of guys that do. They'll call and put it in their report. I tell them to call. I put all the information in, and you call if you want to know how old this is. So older gas valves are a tell as well. These are all older style gas valves, probably 70s and earlier. If you're seeing these, then that unit's definitely older. So boilers. I think it's safe to say that steel's probably 15 to 25-year useful life. Cast iron is 30 to 40. Could be longer. I had one steel boiler. This was for when my kids were in grammar school, so a long time ago, for somebody from the school. And the boiler was pristine, but it was like 18 years old steel. It's back when I used to have a heating company come out and do that portion of the inspection for me. If they screwed up, they owned it. That boiler was mint, and between the inspection and the closing, it failed. So it didn't even have an impact on the heating company, because the owner had to replace it before the house was sold. But had it failed the day after closing, then who knows how that would have went for me and for the company. So to me, and I might have been able to justify what I put in my report, but it probably was going to be a tricky situation there.
One of the things that I put in my reports on water heaters and heating systems is that failure of the equipment can happen anytime, before, during, or after the home inspection. It's just, I know it's stupid, but you're absolutely right, Stan. You'll have someone call you and, you did an inspection 6 years ago and my boiler went out, and now I got to replace it. Now it becomes my problem.
So that's absolutely right. And the more you write, the more, I'm not going to say it's going to make things better or protect you, but there's more hurdles for them to jump the more you put in a report.
Right.
So let me get back to what Scott had mentioned before. He equated something to a car. So I do that a lot because most people own a car. They know the maintenance. They know when they don't maintenance, what happens. And I tell them, you can park your car in the driveway tonight and go out tomorrow and it won't start. You don't have any indication. So I'm just trying to give you an idea. You're let's say in that case, the boiler was in great shape. It was, what did I say, 18 years old, and it was in that 10 to 15 year thing. So I covered myself as far as that's concerned, but it wasn't an issue with me because it failed before. So water heaters, there's a variety of them. I have found that electric water heaters can probably hit that 20-year mark easy, right? There's no direct flame any place on that. So they're heated with elements, and they probably can get to that 20-year mark. Once I see them at 20, I will call them out as beyond their useful life. I don't care if they go another 10. Domestic coils, 15 to 20. I'm sure everybody knows that those coils will scale. The scale will act as insulation and not allow the heat transfer. So people at that point start jacking up the operating temperature of the boiler to try and get more heat transfer. That's not good for the boiler. Sometimes they'll throttle back, like when they're filling a tub up or something, to hold the water in the coil longer. Once I see a coil, if I can determine the age, forget the appearance, it hits that 20-year mark, I'm telling them they're going to probably want to go to an indirect water heater. And if I'm running that water and within 10, 15 minutes, it's like lukewarm, then that just backs me up. Indirect water heater, probably the 15 to 20-year mark. I've seen them out there longer, but not on a regular basis. Right? No direct heat though, but I think for me, I would be on the safe side and say that maybe 25. Aqua booster, similar, right? Another coil with no direct burner underneath, no direct heat. I don't know how many of you guys or how many heat pumps you may have seen. I've only seen a handful. I don't really think they're as good as what people are trying to sell them as. And they're just like a heat pump for a house for heat and air conditioning. Same principle, just different medium that we're heating. You're looking at 10 to 15 years on one of those before the compressor, maybe not the tank, but the compressor will start to develop issues. And I believe they're more expensive. Gas-fired water heater, we already talked a little bit about that. You're looking at maybe 10 to 15. Oil, 10 to 15. The one that I had before this current one, I think maybe I got 16, 17 out of it. However, when they took it out, it was burning through the bottom of the fire chamber and scorching my floor. So it failed and I didn't even know it. Not by water, just burned through the bottom of the tank. And then tankless water heaters that are now mounted on the wall or condensing style, they're about 15 to 20 as well. So if you're viewing this as a pre-recorded webinar, record this code LE506030 and report both codes to us for your certificate. So if you're looking at an oil-fired water heater and the inlet, which is usually dead center of that cutout, is to the left or the right or the bottom of that cutout, your water heater's ready to go. That what's happening is there's, let's say that's a 30-gallon water heater, 8 pounds a gallon, 240 pounds sitting on that combustion chamber. After all the years of heat and cooling off, heat and cooling off, that combustion chamber is fatiguing and the weight of the water is pushing into the chamber and moving that pipe. And then this is not the same tank, obviously, but what also happens is out of the inspection plate, because of that compression of the tank, the soot starts coming out the side there. So you see anything there, you can call for service, but also, be thinking about, unless you can date it, that it's at the end of its service life. Air conditioning systems, I think for the most part are, especially with the Building Intelligence Center now, probably pretty easy to identify most of them as far as their date of manufacture, and then you can go from there. I was taught when I was in the trades that if you turn on the AC system in May and run it to October, you're looking at 15 to 20 years useful life, properly maintained. So there's a 4-year-old unit on the left and a 30-year-old unit on the right. On the left, on its concrete patio, actually. The one on the right is sitting right on the ground. That one on the right operates, but the Delta T wasn't very good on that one. So time for replacement. So in my report, I have sections, I have a summary. It'll talk about any significant defects I find, anything that's older and at the end of its useful life. This goes in there. And then again, get back to Scott, we both feel that being redundant helps us out a lot. So at least in another spot in the air conditioning section, I am going to repeat the fact that, especially if I know the age, that it is beyond its useful life and it should be replaced or probably will need to be replaced in the near future. I think the more you say things, you can miss it once, but you can't miss it 3 times.
You can even use that terminology, budget for its replacement, you know, I
Budget
find.
for its replacement. That's right, Scott. Thank you. Yep. And then if it's just, I had one where something was peeing on it and a quarter of the coil was disintegrated, then in that case, I feel it's easy to say that this needs to be replaced. I don't care what age it is. This thing is got to go. So heat pumps get double duty, right? If they're used for air conditioning as much as they are used for heat, they're used for heat all winter long. 10 to 15 years if they're doing double duty. So if you can tell the age, sometimes they look pristine, and if you don't know the age, you may not know that that guy's kind of old. So now roofing is another story, right? There are no, unless you find a bundle of shingles in the garage and you're sure that it's the same roof, it's going to be very difficult to tell how old a roof is without a receipt, even if the owner says, oh, we installed that 10 years ago. I was doing an inspection for a friend buying a house from his uncle. It's around 2000, 2001. The roof was shot. He goes, Uncle Frank, the roof shot. And Uncle Frank said, oh, we just put that on in 1970. Just put it on in 1970, 30 years ago. People don't have recollection all the time. So you're going to have to take a close look at the roof to see, and even the types of roofing. So for forever, I say 3-tab asphalt shingle, normally 15 to 20 years, but they were selling 30-year shingles. The fact of the matter is, if you can lift them or feel them someplace, they'll be heavier. And nobody was spending twice as much money for 10 more years. So I felt it was safe to say 10 to 15 or 10 to 20 on a 3-tab. And I say 25 plus on the architecturals. And they can go up to 50. And then there's some that are called lifetime. I won't see that for sure. Okay, Jim. If you look close at whatever asphalt shingle and the edges are worn, dry, brittle shingles, I'll get up to the eaves at least and bend the shingle. And if they snap, I'm calling it older and at the end of its useful life. You see this granular loss at the edges or the fiberglass showing through at the edges, it's probably older. And you have to figure out how you want to handle it. But for me, those are called older roofing. If there's 2 layers on a roof and the roof in the house is 40, 45 years old, you may not know how long that first layer lasts, but you can bet that second layer is probably older, unless the first one failed in 10 years or lasted 30 years. So there's a lot to kind of use to try and determine
Even if
what
they
you want to say without knowing the age. And look at,
oh,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, even, I try to lift them, and then granted, I've seen improperly installed shingles not stick either, or when they were installed, but that's another indication too on age.
Right, but it might not be an old roof just because
Correct.
they lift.
Could have been improper.
Yep.
Nailed too high, nailed into the overdriven.
And you don't even have. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. You just tell them. It's difficult to tell how old this roof is. I can't tell you what the useful life is, and it could be older. It's best to be honest. I guess moss and the curling of the shingles can be an indication of how old, but bad conditions with regarding moss could happen to a midlife roof. So it's kind of difficult. But the cupping and curling is usually could be age, could be just bad roof ventilation. So you got to use your head a little bit. Got to look at a lot of other things. That's a kind of a theme in home inspection. Combine other conditions to determine, what you're looking at. So back, I'm going to say in the 90s, maybe when they first went to fiberglass on a regular basis, they weren't getting um, the right mix of or putting enough asphalt on it. And when they expanded, they would crack. So we were seeing a lot of that back then, and it was on newer installations. It could happen within 4 or 5 years of the installation, but it also can happen at the end of the life of that roof, towards the end of the life. So most of the shingle, well, they would go up and down like that. They would go horizontally. They go diagonally. But there's other indications that a roof is older, right? With the granular loss along with that cracking, with curling and cupping. If you look at the keyways on that roof, they're round. They start off square, but then that shingle dries up and starts stretching and rounding out those keyways. So if you don't know when that roof was installed, that's an older roof, even if those cracks weren't there. And that's not saying it's going to fail, but telling them it's an older roof. There's another indication of the rounded keyways. Roof looks fine, it's not leaking, but it's my job to say that roof is older and at the end of its useful life. This was on the shoreline near Milford, in Milford. That's not a great picture, but there's so many different shingles on that roof, color variations, some that are missing, some that were replaced, some that are lifting currently. I didn't care how old that roof was done, but I do believe it was older. But you know, the shoreline has a lot of wind, and once they start lifting, they're going to blow. So, you know, you protect yourself, you protect your client. Damaged shingles, that can happen for a variety of reasons, but if you see a bunch of them, that roof doesn't look bad, but I knew for a fact was like 18 years old, that roof. So in my report, 15 to 20 for a 3-tab, that was an older roof. That was probably improper installation, a roof, a tree limb strike. I'm just sometimes worried about when you see that, can you fix that? And then 3 months later, there's another section like that. So you got to be careful. Maybe you don't know the age of that roof, but you have to. I think you can kind of get close. If it's a single layer and the house is 60 years, and you know that's a 20-year, probably third layer. At least that's what I do.
Dan, do you also go by the size of the ridge vent? You see a lot of these bulkier, older ridge vents were larger. Now they have the low profile ones, which would indicate a newer installation, right?
Sure, but I like to. I know the age of the house, right?
Right.
If it's a 60, 70-year-old house, 55, whatever, and I got one layer on it, they probably took off 2. I look at how many empty nail holes are in the roof, or how many nails are coming through. So I use a lot of stuff to determine how I'm going to handle that portion of the roof inspection. So this is older and worn, right? I think that's a no-brainer. Is it leaking? Again, the cupped curling shingles, definitely an indication of either a ventilation problem or age, or a combination. If you think the attic's vented properly, then it's age. So now the rest of this is, well, at least the metal roofing, I don't see a whole lot of on residential. I don't do commercial much anymore, so I don't see it much. So this basically is just some general information. So metal roofs have a longer lifespan than traditional asphalt shingles. While home inspectors must typically replace their shingle roofs every 20, 25 years, metal roofs can last up to 50 years. It's more cost effective considering the cost of a new roof. Chipping or missing paint. When metal roofs are manufactured, a weather-resistant paint or coating is applied. If you notice chipping or missing paint, it could be an indication that the roof is aging. Jim? Okay. Wood shingle roofs. Again, I don't see a whole lot of them in the 37 years. If I saw a dozen, maybe I'm off. Maybe it was more. So they can last, this says up to 30 years, but if you oil them and clean them, they can go a little bit longer than that, depending on the quality of roof and maintenance. Over time, they may develop cracks, splits, moss or algae growth, suggesting an older roof. So you got to kind of look at, I wouldn't walk on them. Scott, have you ever walked on a wood roof? Is Scott here?
I think
No. But you found a pretty bad one once, right?
Yeah, quite a few. And then even, sometimes, I don't know how everybody else does it, but when I get up, we get a lot when we go down south towards Greenwich, Darien, heading towards New York. I bring in I just do it personally because I tell you what, I've learned a lot and I found and there's been a lot of issues and they're not cheap, 150, $200,000 roofs, 250. So I bring in a roofing, wood roof contractor, somebody that installs wood roofing, and he's found a lot. You remember Hans, he's done a few presentations and he'll probably come out and do another one for us. But yes, no, I don't get on them. Not, absolutely not.
That's a good point that I should have put in here. So I'm not going to say that missing anything is good, but you miss a small ranch roof or a cape roof that's easy and cheap to replace. That's one thing. But you got a $1.5 $2 million house and you miss a roof on that, you're probably going to be working at McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts after that, because those are the people that can take you to the laundry. Clay tile roofs, again, I haven't had much experience with them. They're not prevalent where I work, and unlike a lot of guys, I kind of stay away from the bigger houses because of what we just talked about. But I'd rather do 2 small ranches than a big McMansion. But anyways, that's me. So clay tiles can last for 50 years or more when maintained properly. Cracked tiles, chipped tiles, loose tiles, pieces of tiles in the gutter, roof leaks, and or water stains in the attic can indicate older material at the end of its useful life. I've done a fair share of slate for some reason, and it's the stone, if it's quality stone, can last a very long time. It says here 75 to 200 years. That's a big spread. What I found is that the fasteners fail, and that's when the shingles loosen, they fall off. And that's, how do you replace a fastener? So flaking, missing or damaged slate, soft or crumbling slate, white, mineral efflorescence, delamination, all indicate calling in an expert. And with slate roofs, I always recommend bringing in an expert. If they don't want to bring it in when I'm going out to the house, I just say it again in a report, especially if I find issues that I am concerned with. But once I see the water leaking in the attic, that's warrants me asking or telling them to bring somebody in. It's hard to determine the useful life of one of these, even if you know how old the house is. Cement tiles, cracked, broken, missing tiles, damaged tiles, worn out underlayment, spalling and deterioration, roof leaks, excessive repairs, all an indication of at least a problematic roof or older tiles. Knowing the age of the house and then knowing what we think is the useful life of material is very helpful. Gives you an idea where you're standing with the age. Roll roofing. Typically has a lifespan of 15 years. I think 10 or 11, but this says 15. Signs of deterioration may become noticeable as early as 5 years after installation. Unlike asphalt shingles, which have a longer lifespan, roll roofing is a single-ply system that tends to be more delicate. It's often used for secondary structures or as a cost-effective roofing material. To extend the lifespan of roll roofing, regular maintenance, inspections, and repairs are recommended. Usually the perimeter could be problematic just from an installation point of view or prior to the roof wearing out. So if you're in a house and you see leakage around the walls, the eaves, usually And you probably would have looked at the roof already and noticed that the perimeter might be a little shaky. But once you start to see the granular loss and just like a fiber wear and tear on the roof, or the seams are lifted, you're probably better off just telling them. And if you can judge the, like some people say, well, roofing went on 10 years ago and you're looking at that and it's shot, then you know it's at the end of its useful life.
No cricket for that chimney.
Yeah.
Throwing it in there with 20 minutes left.
EPDM or membrane roofing can be expected to last 20 to 30 years with an average of 23 years, possibly longer with diligent maintenance. It's a synthetic rubber membrane and can be punctured from walking on or dragging anything over the surface. I worked in a commercial, a city building with a flat roof, portion of it, and one of the HVAC guys dropped a screwdriver and it penetrated the roof. So you got to be very careful. They could be glued and repaired, but I'm saying 20. Once you get to 20 years on them, you got to look at them really, really close. And they are becoming popular for flatter roofs now in residential. They just, and even with the 20 or even 25 year, and if you can get 30, great. But you put them on with 25 to 30 year architectural shingle, you still have to keep your fingers crossed that rubber roof membrane lasts as long as the shingled roofing. So I always tell people, when you got different materials on your home, you have to look at them at different times because they may not all last together. Cracking, splitting, leaking, all that stuff is indication of older rubber membrane. Modified bit, on the average, it has a useful life of 50 to 25 years when they're installed and maintained properly. That's the other thing with flat roofing materials. I would much rather see somebody that does more flat roofing than shingle roofing doing a flat roof than the shingle roofing guy who comes in and does an occasional flat roof and thinks they know what they're doing. So it depends on the lifespan, depends on factors including property's location, level of foot traffic, and material quality, among others. And let's not forget workmanship. Granular loss and wear, inadequately heated seams, edge bending and wear, areas of mineral loss, small splits and tears, cracking and alligatoring, all indicate wear, age, and a shorter remaining useful life. So you see that stuff, you're probably safe in saying the roof is older, or that portion of the roof is older and at the end of its useful life. So I threw this in, got 15 minutes, so we're gonna have to chat about this. I don't even know how I got on it. I'm on a Facebook group, electrical and questions and answers. And I just thought, they don't know that I'm a home inspector. They only know my name. I thought I'd ask them, if they were hired by someone purchasing a home and they were only hired to evaluate the electrical system, what would you do? What would you look at? What would you call out? So I got 58 responses. I'm going to say that 75% stated, or what they stated was probably what we do for the most part. One guy said that he would scan it with an infrared camera as part of his evaluation. One guy said if it was over 50 years old, that he'd have the service entrance cable and the electrical panel replaced. And I just felt, they were all over the place. And I think if anybody's on Facebook home inspection groups, so are we. What piqued my interest was there was an electrician selling his house, and the home inspector scanned it with an infrared camera and called out some wiring that was too hot, and they all had a big laugh on it, and there was no problem with the panel. So I said, okay, let me see what you guys do. And I just found that they were all over the place. Nobody mentioned making sure sub panels were bonded properly and grounded. It was really interesting to me. So when we see fuses, fuses are outdated, but is a fuse system at the end of its useful life? Is an electrical system ever at the end of its useful life? Because if we start calling out systems or wiring even that's at the end of their useful lives, and how are you going to get that wiring out of the house and put new stuff in? You could say it's obsolete, it's outdated. I think we all probably do that. You know, fuses are better than circuit breakers because they're going to blow. They just could be misused. So there's a lot of panels out there that are problematic that I would put under potentially safety issues. And I always recommend that things like Federal Pacific and Zinsco and all those questionable panels be replaced, even though they're functional. And we've never had a problem. We've been here 20 years, and I get that. But just like Scott was referring to the ball tire, no problem until it blows. There are others like Pushmatic. You can't get parts for them, and they don't have the overload protection that we have nowadays. So while they may not be at the end of their useful lives, they're certainly not up to date. So that's an interesting dilemma on how you want to report on that. And then knob and tube wiring. Still seeing it, still finding live circuits because nobody wanted to rip them out or trace them out or bust through walls or whatever the case may be. I find them personally in attic, live circuits in attics for lighting. Sometimes I'll find an outlet by luck because I don't test every single outlet. I don't move furniture, but I find an ungrounded outlet in a room on a second floor, say, and the attic knob and tube is hot. I'm assuming that's knob and tube as well. And I think that the correction for the most part, if you're not going to dig into the walls, is to put GFIs on those outlets. And in one case in West Haven here in Connecticut, the owner actually went to the building department, and the building department says, it's functional wiring. It's just older. They really didn't have an opinion on it, basically. So it's from town to town, municipality to municipality. But I always say that it's unsafe wiring. It doesn't meet today's standards. And if you can replace it or protect it, then that's what you should do.
The other thing, Stan, is the biggest thing, and going with even talking about roofs, and we're seeing it here in Connecticut, is moss-like and any of that stuff on the roof. Insurance companies with knob and tube, they're not insuring people. They're even not, the roof could be brand new, but if there's some moss on it, until it's cleaned off, they're not insuring the people. So all this stuff, even with the fuse panels, I mean, it's not so much.
Correct.
Worried about people putting in a 30 amp on a 15 and creating a fire hazard. So that's some of the stuff that I've,
So I've been told that they're looking at roofs with a satellite.
Yeah, you are.
So I'm going to change the subject a little bit. We got 12 minutes, 11 minutes. I got my first call. Okay, let's finish that. So report on what you know. That's how, just because it's been good to me and I haven't had a lot of issues, that's, I continue to do what works for me. The exact age of a roof is not known. That's what I tell people. It does have evidence of wear and tear. If there's no leakage, it's functional, and, keep an eye on it. Don't be afraid to say you don't know what you don't know. The age of the heating system could not be determined through information available. Maybe a heating contractor could come in and give you a better idea if you really want to know, and you should, to determine the remaining useful life. Qualify any statement based on information provided by the homeowner. If somebody says the roof is 15 years old and there's no proof of that, and you think it's older, then say the homeowner stated the roof is 15 years old. I see wear and tear or conditions that I believe make me believe the roof is older. And based on what? Based on the condition of the component, because we don't know the age. We don't want to go down the tubes for something that we can't determine. We got to really cover our ass on in the reporting process. So I got my first call for an inspection. The lady said, she goes, I need my house inspected. I said, well, are you selling it or gonna sell it? She goes, no, my insurance company is requiring I have an inspection. So I said, well, did they say specifically what they wanted to know? Because she's changing insurances. She's trying to save money. So she says no. So I said, can you ask your agent to find out if they want specific components done or they want a full home inspection? So she got back to me in a day and said, I have to have a full home inspection. So it was, I don't know, 1,700 square foot house. I said, well, I don't know how much money you're saving, but you're going to spend $650 for me to do a home inspection to tell you what condition your house is in. So luckily the roof was new, the heating system was newer, the water heater was newer, but there was a sump pump. She had a water problem in the past. She didn't install it. And I would be curious to find out what the results of that were, if there were any requirements by the insurance company. Has anybody here been asked to perform inspections?
I've done a handful. I've probably done 4 or 5 over the last just couple of months.
Yeah, full inspection.
So I did 2 of them were full inspections, and that there were some, and they were current owners and some unknown facts around it. One of them was a renewal thing, but he may have not done something in timely fashion. But that was a full inspection, and he was willing to pay for it because of the savings he was getting with. Oh no, he's changing carriers, I guess, or maybe he was looking to swap and then decided to. In any event, a couple of full inspections, and then I've done a couple of just I'm buying the home, but my insurance company needs to know, and they need from a inspector, they need to know the age and condition of the roof, the mechanicals, the plumbing, and the electrical. So like basically, is it original? Has it been updated? The materials used, same thing with the roof, current condition, whatever. So I just got to go out, put something on my letterhead. It's quite frankly, it's a 15-minute inspection. I charge them usually $250 depending on where I'm going. And I always tell them that if they need more, let me know, because I've got some general ideas to what if they did have some specific questions. I see enough to be able to answer those after the fact.
Right.
But I've also gotten people asking me for a 4-point, and I used to live in Florida, and a 4-point is definitely not a northern thing.
Right.
And that's a question, like, you need to clarify what your insurance company actually needs me to write down, because I don't want to do something that isn't going to suffice. But I've had an increase. I've also had a couple of, oddly enough, people asking if I do lead paint inspections, because their insurance company needs to know if there's lead paint in the house. And that to me is just baffling, because the answer, depending on the age of the house, is yes, there's lead paint. And the fix is paint over it. It's not feasible to remove every bit of lead paint, nor can you test every surface in the house. So that's one that I am curious to see if that continues to pop up, but I've seen that a lot lately too.
So do we think that is going to grow?
I hope so. Selfishly, I mean, as a homeowner, I hope it doesn't, but as a home inspector, I hope it does.
And should we be promoting that or contacting insurance companies and putting ourselves out there for maybe a direct, I don't know, referral or whatever? They probably wouldn't do that.
So I reached out to one of the ones I did was a full inspection. Nice homeowner, talked to him and kind of asked who his agent was. And I don't know if it was a Progressive. It was one of the big ones. I forget what it was, but I reached out to a local office, not his, because he was in a weird scenario with a work thing, and his rep was like in Delaware. And I reached out and just asked a couple of questions of, hey, have you heard of this? Is there that type of, basically that question of, can I be on a list? And they kind of looked at me like I had 3 heads and had no idea what I was talking about.
Yeah. Well, I just going to keep an eye on that. And so I've had requests after a home inspection, somebody saying my insurance company wants you to I forgot exactly what he asked for, something to do with the roof, to give them information on a roof. I said, I already did. It's in your report.
Yeah.
I'm not going, I won't go back outside back and say anything different than what I put in my report. If that's not enough for them, then you got to find out exactly what they want and maybe go to a roofing contractor, because I covered as much as I can with the roof.
Yeah.
What else do you want? So I just find it interesting. I think our profession is changing in a couple different ways. And, you know, I never like to do the small little jobs unless they were on my way to or back from an inspection. And I always turn down like single component requests, because I always felt no matter what I know, I'm not an expert in that particular area. So I'll do it as a complete home inspection, but I don't want to go out there and masquerade as a knowledgeable roofing contractor when I'm not. I'm a home inspector. So from now on, I want to know exactly what the insurance company would want. But they said full inspection as if somebody was buying a house. So I said, then you got it. That's what you're going to get.
Yeah. No, like
So
I said, selfishly, I hope they make that more of a thing, because I think that'll just drive the home inspection back to, if you're buying a house, you got to get an inspection because you're going to need to do it for your insurance anyways.
Well, right. And I'm going to, but I don't think anybody really cares when the things get done, because they're selling a house with defects that people are winding up paying for after they buy the house. So I don't think anybody's going to care when that inspection happens, whether it's prior to, or if the insurance company is lax enough to have you do it after you buy the house, which would be ridiculous. I just think, unfortunately, and I don't know how, us as a profession, because we're small in each state compared to the real estate profession, can be strong enough to fight that waiving of home inspections and stuff like that. That's what's changed. I mean, the interest rates are coming down, yes. So I think the market's got a little better. There's no inventory, but we'll just have to wait and see where our profession goes, I think.
Yeah.
So
I tell all my clients, do not send the inspection report to your mortgage company or your insurance company if they request it. And a lot of the insurance companies are getting tricky now, because I'm not the only home inspector doing that, is that they'll call the client when they're looking for insurance, and the insurance company says, we don't need the inspection report, just send us the receipt. And the client will go, okay, I'll send you the receipt. And then this way they know they got an inspection. And I just tell them, don't send anything. And if you do have to send them something, you need to speak to your attorney or your agent prior to sending them anything. But I think Stan and I think Mike's right that it's going to be going in the direction of insurance companies and the mortgage companies, one or the other, requiring this, because they're cutting everybody off anyways. They're raising rates, and why would you want to insure something that you don't know what the quality of it is? And the only way to get that quality is to get a home inspection. A lot of the stuff I hear is they want to know if there's older water pipes, are they lead, are they brass, that kind of stuff. And age of roof.
And that's what I was thinking they wanted. And that makes sense. But a full-blown inspection to cost her that money when maybe it could have been scaled down. So anyways, I just thought I'd ask, anybody else doing that? Get those requests yet? Because they're probably coming down the pike. So for us, I think your agreement's going to be the same, no matter who you're inspecting for.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do less components, then you got to put that in your agreement that the client requested. And even if you want to put per insurance company to have just plumbing, electrical, roof, whatever, we have to be able to change our methodology to make sure we're covering ourselves. Somebody says, well, you didn't tell me about the sink faucet not working. You didn't request it. Well, it's part of the plumbing, but you know what I'm saying. You got to cover your butt every time we walk out, jump in our vehicle. So
I have a footnote at the bottom of any of my addendums or these scenarios that says not a full inspection and should not be relied on as such.
Yeah.
as well as in my body of, kind of breaking down the specifics of what I was asked to look for along with the agreement. So that's, but yeah, that's something I always worry about is covering my ass.
Well,
Well, it's 8 o'clock. We're going to call it. April 15th, we have Connecticut Chimney and Vent that's going to be giving a presentation on the essentials of chimney and vent inspections. And we have a full list of our upcoming webinars on our site. And we're doing very well booking out. Scott's doing a great job getting us speakers. And if anybody has any questions, just submit them by email and we'll address any concerns you guys have. If you have any ideas or any kind of webinars you'd like to see in the future, just email us and we'll do our best on getting them.
And I'd like to say thank you, Jim, for all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see, and getting those certificates out. I mean, literally, you probably have a certificate when you hang up right now. So,
certificates will be sent out tomorrow morning.
So. Dan's been doing this a long time, so he's got a wealth of knowledge. So, I'll have to say thank you to those two guys for making it all happen here with Cornerstone.
Great. Thanks, guys.
yeah,